Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy, Lore, and More, we have Amena Jamali, and she is joining me to talk about her book, The Bell Tolling. And this is a really special episode. I've been really looking forward to this since she booked it like months ago. So you're in for a treat. She's really wonderful. I was part of her launch team for her latest book, and it was a lot of fun. So welcome, Amena.
Thank you.
It's more of an intro than I usually give, but like I've been looking forward to this for so long.
Yeah, definitely. It's been definitely something that I'm been watching the days till it got here on my calendar.
I totally would have moved it up if you wanted to. I would have found somewhere to squeeze it in.
This is a really good time for it. It's a really good time.
Awesome. So let's talk about the bell tolling. What's it about?
So, the bell tolling. Well, let's see. Does it show up through the blurb? Okay.
I think you might have to describe it for the folks, because the folks on YouTube will be able to see anything you hold up, but the folks on Spotify, Apple, Audible, Amazon, etc., they don't have a visual.
Well, okay. So
use your powers of description, author.
I will describe it. Starting with, I'll describe the cover and then I will describe the story. So the cover is, it's a dark sky background with like a really dark sky, sort of so dark with almost black with bits of gray. And on the left edge and the top edge, there is this frame in gold. And that is like medium level. And in the foreground is half the face of this character. He is dark skinned. He has gold scales and a gold wing. And he's wearing a crown, a white crown with red, green, and white jewels. And above that, it says the Lord of Freedom. It says Amena Jamali first. Then it says the Lord of Freedom. Then the bell tolling, and then book one. And by the bell tolling, there is a bell also in gold. That bell, by the way, is traced from the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia.
Oh.
So it's not exactly that because it was then like painted by my cover artist, but that is where the original tracing for it comes from.
That's cool.
So the reason I chose this specific cover is because it's supposed to represent the story, like represent the beginning of the story as a whole. And each successive cover reveals a little bit more about it in a very visual way.
Mm-hmm.
So the bell tolling takes place in this world that is shrouded in darkness, and it's tyrannized by the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, whose cruelty is so great that he's blotted out the sun with smog and smoke, like the background of the books. And his cruelty's impacted every person down to the last child. And amid all of this, there comes a divinely blessed savior, Lucian, who gathers together 4 companions, Lucian, Malika, Ellie, and Arista, and Kairos. And with these 4, he reconquers the world, nation by nation, province by province, heart by heart. And each book is the story of one of the nations he reconquers. So it's on the very surface level, it seems well compartmentalized that, okay, in book 1, he meets them, he reconquers nation number 1. In book 2, he reconquers nation number 2. In book 3, he reconquers nation number 3. So it seems really well compartmentalized. And it seems like, okay, well, it's like a natural progression of things. But the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is not the sort of villain who sits in his castle. And he's very active and very present and always scheming for more and more evil things. So he's the sort of villain that his cruelty isn't just about sort of, like maniacally laughing or even this thing about blotting out the sky. He has very active and rapacious designs against individuals across the world. And that is why, on the surface, while it might seem compartmentalized, when we really get into it, it becomes scarier and scarier and scarier because he has many, many evil plans. And although Lucian has a lot of powers, he's in some ways working on multiple levels to, first of all, undo what's already existing, the evil that has already been put in place. So the military aspect of it, the political aspect of it, like trying to institute a new government in a place where all the laws have collapsed, trying to create a new sense of community, and then also having to deal with everyone's trauma, his own trauma, everyone's dire mental health crisis, because how could you live in such a time and not have a dire mental health crisis? And
Seriously.
while also dealing with new schemes that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is perpetrating. And that's why like, the stakes kind of get higher and higher and higher because of his evil plans. And Lucian is, in a way, like trying to stem back the tide. He's succeeding, but it feels like there are moments where you're wondering, is he really going to be able to keep the Blood-soaked Sorcerer back? Because this is a lot, and there's a lot going on.
Oh wow. And that's just in this book what's going on.
Well, it's the
That sounds like we crossed over into
it's both the series and the book.
Right.
So like
that's what I thought.
When I was this year when I republished the Bell Tolling, I put an emphasis on creating a tagline. So my tagline for the series is, "Are there some evils even the divine cannot conquer?" And that's also the tagline for the first book, because I kind of ended up writing the Bell Tolling as a sort of like microcosm, a first taste of what the series would as a whole be. So it has all of the things, all the characteristics that the series as a whole has. The found family moments between Lucian and his chosen four companions and the people who eventually gather around them. The whole chosen one aspect of Lucian and his companions themselves. The good versus evil battles. The traveling and seeing grand landscapes, the action of it, the adventure, the magic of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in the Bell Tolling, but it's also the whole series. So it's sort of it turns out to be that if someone read the Bell Tolling, they would have a really good idea of how the series is going to look too.
Oh wow. I started it. I haven't finished it yet.
Well, then you know something of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I want all the spoilers still.
Well,
I got interrupted. I probably shouldn't have been reading it on the job, but you know, when you're interested in a book, your need to read does not obey mundane things like hour of the day.
This
what
is
else
true.
Your to-do list.
Very true. So it's I like to say that, okay, so there's a lot of world building behind the series that props up the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's plans. Like it's on that structure that his plans are laid. So the magic and world building are kind of part and parcel of his plans, and some of that will deepen the dark side of the world, like how bad things could really get. And then on Lucian's side, his response is also part and parcel of the world building, because and I'm kind of just talking, okay? So,
that's why. That's why you're here. That's what we do on the podcast.
So in a really fundamental way, the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is his the thing that makes him terrifying as a villain to me is that his intention here isn't, oh well, I eventually want to rule these people. Like I'm doing all of this to them so that I will rule them. He's not interested in ruling. He's interested in taking them and their lives and their pain and their misery and all the evil he can inflict and going against the Almighty directly. So everything and everyone is fodder to him. Mm-hmm. And there is no that one person or that one place is sacred. He doesn't have any of that. There is nothing sacred to him. There's nothing like he has a one soft spot for. He doesn't have anything like that. There are places that he is perfectly willing to let his own troops get killed because he doesn't care about them either. And on the other side, Lucian, who represents the divine, who is supposed to be the Almighty's chosen savior, he cares about everyone and everything. And his side of the magic is that he needs to do everything in such a way that the maximum number of people can be saved. So some of that is one of Lucian's stranger characteristics is that he buries the bodies of his enemies because the magic of Icilia is like this complex, like beneath the surface, this complex interplay of like blessed energy and dark energy and good actions and bad actions and harmony and discord. And Lucian is very careful that the things he does adds harmony to the world rather than subtracts it. So he buries the bodies of his enemies. He prays over their graves. And on the other side, the Blood-soaked Sorcerer does not care what he does to anyone at all. So it makes for a stark contrast. And the way that gets into their magic is that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's magic is the magic of fear and terror and pain, to overthrow one's free will. That's like the central tenet of his magic. And using that, being very crafty and very ingenious, like the worst villains are, he manages to create new forms of accomplishing based on the same principles. So one of the things, do you mind if I like say a total spoiler?
Yes, please. Yes, okay. Spoilers. Yes.
So one of the things I realized he could do in book 2 is that he can create not like holograms, but the idea of holograms, like he can create separate manifestations of himself that are linked to his own consciousness, because he can take someone else's body and soul and reconstitute it in his own shape. And so it's like, I don't know, it's sort of like thinking like a big evil poisonous fungus feeding on the land.
Ooh,
and then
that's an image.
And then on the other side, Lucian is, as the divinely blessed savior, supposed to have absolute supremacy and dominion over the land. So he's trying to peel all of that back. And so his magic is about touching every soul. So some of the I have to say more interesting interactions are about where he is trying to use that ability to impact the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's soul, if only not to overthrow his free will, because that's something Lucian also needs to be afraid of, that he should not take even his enemy's free will, but at least to eject him from a place, expel him from a place, something like that. And then to remedy the damage that has been left behind without, again, impacting anyone's free will. So it's sort of like the land is Lucian's. It's supposed to be his. He can see everyone and everything in it. But the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's shadows are such that he can mask certain things, and he can corrupt certain things so that even Lucian is challenged, although it's supposed to be all his.
Oh wow.
So I feel like I just like went and gave like the highest level of the magic, but it's also the most interesting and dramatic part.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Now, this is really cool. It's really cool. My brain has glitched now because I'm like thinking about. I'm also a fantasy author, so I'm like thinking about it. on another level. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so like the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. It sounds like so like he's a totalitarian dictator type of person. Does he have like trusted lieutenants, or is he like, I guess depending on his magic and the way you just described him, I guess he could kind of sort of be everywhere and knowing what is going on in other places if he's a fungus, because they have that if he's a literal fungus, they have, they have that whole structure underneath the ground, and they know more than we do.
I think he could. I think he. I think he could. He could be. He could be. So some of it, okay, I'm honestly still like designing
Oh, of
the plot
course.
of the subsequent books. So he's doing that kind of thing, but he's not all the way there yet. And one of those things,
Gotcha. He's evolving.
he is constantly evolving. So he
That's
does
cool.
have trusted lieutenants, meaning he believes that their ambitions are in the same direction as his, that they also want to launch an attack against the Almighty. So they're not going to somehow, suddenly get cold feet or something. And
Oh,
they're
okay. So they have like free will though. Like he's like
do
assuming
they
that they're
though?
all.
Do they though?
That's true. That's true.
Because the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's magic works in such a way that his magic, conjuring,
Mm.
um, anyone that he creates as a conjurer is subservient to him, and anyone who is weaker than him is subservient to him. And that's basically everyone. So anyone who, so someone could think, well, now I have this evil magic too. I could set myself up as a rival. But the thing is that no one's magic is as great as his, because this is kind of like dipping into the complex web of energy part. That he is the first person to take magic and twist it in the way that he did, and that gave him enormous power that no one else is able to rival. And because of that, and everyone else, like his lieutenants, he basically, so the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, he basically corrupted himself in order to have this magic. His lieutenants also corrupted themselves, but they didn't come up with it. So their magic is necessarily a few degrees lesser.
Mm-hmm.
And so they are subservient to him whether they like it or not. And that means that if he should so choose, he could take control of them from afar as well, because their will is subservient to his. Even when they think that they've gotten free of that, they still haven't. The thing is, though, that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is also the kind of villain who likes to play with his prey,
Mm-hmm.
because he actually, there's a sense in which he doesn't actually care about it. Like he's not doing this with a twisted noble intention of ruling. So there's no dignity to him. There's no regality to him. So he doesn't consider himself, and because of the kinds of things he has done, the evils he has done, he doesn't consider himself bound by the rules of mortality. So if the Slicer in Kudurin lets a rebellion grow and doesn't take active measures to stop it, the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is kind of like, I want to see what you're going to do. And when I want to, not when you expect it, I'm going to step in and I'm going to do whatever I want to the rebels and to you. And I don't really care what you were expecting. I don't care what someone else has thought of my actions and predictions, thought of my actions and my strategy. I'm going to do it whenever I feel like it. And when I feel like it, you'll never know, because it'll surprise you. And so this, if I'm going to say something about the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, I should say something about Lucian. So one of his qualities is consistency, because he knows that the people have been tormented by this kind of behavior for so long that they don't really like, even when they are very far away from him, and when the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is gone from there, they don't really feel secure anymore. So he is careful about being consistent, about keeping to traditions and rituals, and acting in a way that is consistent.
Mhm.
Because it's the way that he shows that there is a different life possible than the one that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer has set up, where everyone is just like prey of different levels, and he is the only predator.
How long have they been under the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's rule? Sounds like a long time.
So it's between 15 to about 20 years in different places, a little longer in certain regions.
That's like a generation.
So when I was doing my like timeline design,
Yeah.
I wanted to pick something where I wanted to pick a time frame where I could say that my heroes were born
hmm
at the time of the fall, like they were born shortly before the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's full conquest. But it shouldn't also be too short a time, so it would feel like, oh well, he's hardly ruled for he's hardly ruled. He doesn't
Right.
really have an impact.
So people would remember the times before, but
Yeah,
your characters wouldn't because they grew up only knowing that time.
they would have enough of a memory that they would remember the blue sky before everything turned black. They would have that kind of memory.
Right,
Um,
yeah.
so they would remember the days where the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's takeover seemed increasingly imminent, but they wouldn't remember the good days. But
hmm
there would be people around them who could remember the good days.
hmm
Since and I thought, like, if I stretch the timeline any further than that, um it would make it really difficult for like the logistics of the like the practical things, that my heroes have to be born, they have to be
Right,
raised,
right.
they have to grow up, they there has to be they have to be people around them that would support them.
Right,
um
right.
but then I also thought to myself that even 15 years of rule under someone like the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, that is something that would feel like an eternity,
Mm,
because um evil destroys much faster than good can create, and even even that many years would be enough to completely destroy a people, that
yeah, yeah.
completely break their spirits, break their traditions, and just leave them as hollow shells of themselves.
Do they have hope before Lucian comes, or they don't?
So I think that's it's a question that I'm looking forward to increasingly dive into.
I see.
So,
And it might be an individual thing too. Like,
so there is a prophecy that
okay.
the first quest leader had, Lucian's predecessor several centuries prior had. So Lucian's position, by the way, is not like like a like a one generation after another generation position. It's hereditary, but his position only comes up in times of great calamity.
Gotcha.
So there is 200 years between his predecessor and him. And so his predecessor, a long time prior, 150 years prior, towards the end of her reign, leaves a prophecy that predicts Lucian's coming in roundabout terms. And she sends this prophecy to every household there is at that time. So she uses her magic, her authority, to make sure everyone knows it. And people keep that prophecy, because what follows after is the Golden Age. So they have that prophecy, and some people remember it, and they're looking for Lucian to be born, for Lucian, for his office to be reinstituted. And then there comes the dynamic that I'm increasingly exploring, that there are people that, because of the way Lucian's family hides his existence, there are people who legitimately think he's dead, that
Oh
he was
wow.
killed as a child and destroyed by the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. And then there are others that never hear whether he was born at all, and they think to themselves that the Almighty has abandoned us, that the quest leader, even if he was born, he hasn't come for us, he's never going to come for us, and there's no reason to believe anything anymore. And then there are people who are like they're basically kind of like looking at the time that's passing and thinking, well, we're on our own, aren't we? So it depends on the nation, on the group of people, on the individual, like you said.
Yeah.
Some are more hopeful, some are more despondent, some are bitter, some are just accepted the cruelty, like, choose the winning side since the quest leader isn't coming. And then I think some just don't care, that they've reached that point that they are just apathetic and they just want to live out the remainder of their days if they can, avoiding the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's notice. So it's a wide spectrum of people.
Yeah, well, of course, it's a world.
Yeah,
it has more than one person. So yeah,
definitely.
Why did the Blood-soaked Sorcerer cover the sky with darkness or smoke, or why did he like blot out the sky, basically?
So I think I'm still the fun thing about all of this is that I can keep adding to his reasons.
Yeah.
But I think the reasons that exist so far, the ones
Right.
that I'm very sure of, the ones that are like referred to at least somewhat,
Right.
is the first is that he knew when a person sees the celestial bodies, they see the sun, the moon, the stars. That is a source of hope. Just that right there is a source of hope. There's a reason that everything from religious texts to poems to fictional novels talk about the sun, the moon, and the stars as a source of hope, as a source of dreams coming true and worries going away and hope reigniting. And the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, he's aware that the people of Icilia have that kind of belief about the sun, the moon, and the stars. And he understood very poignantly that if he took that away, it would break them a lot faster than if he did some other act. And he does all the other acts. But this particular magic, he covers everywhere with it, knowing that it would be the first thing to break someone's spirits. Because like Icilia is a world before Lucian's coming that it's a world without sunshine. So it's really a world where the passage of day and night is difficult to discern because it's all dull and dark. And so that's his first reason.
Right.
Second reason is he's after all not interested in ruling. So he uses that blotting out of the sun as a way of controlling the environment, of negatively impacting the environment. You could say he's like the ultimate environmental monster because he actively and maliciously chooses to destroy the water, the rivers, the lakes, the crops, the forests, the animals. He is actively and maliciously starving them of sunlight, and so breaking nature's natural cycle. And then that goes from some of the more esoteric things that he hopes to do with it. And some of that is that, so the smog is, we could say, like, in a very practical sense, that it's maybe some 10-20,000 feet up in the sky. But when it rains, that the poison in the smog comes down onto the earth and it poisons the land. So some of that is also that he knows that when it rains with the smog and its poison, that would be part of people's bodies, that it would be the sort of thing that it becomes a part of who they are, part of their physical structure as well. So then you really can't escape it because it's simply a part of you. And in contrast, what Lucian does is that his coming, as he reconquers a nation, he uncovers the sky. So there's this like really amazing moment that I'm so excited I got a chance to describe in one of my books, The Resonant Bell, where he, with his magic, he uses it to brush back the smog. so it dissipates. And as it does, the blue sky emerges from between the black tendrils, and the sun shines for the first time. And things come back to life slowly because of this action. And it costs him a lot of magic. So the Blood-soaked Sorcerers built this up over in places like at least a decade and a half. And for Lucian to undo it, in book one, it basically incapacitates him. But the magic that he uses does it to such degree that he is able to purify even individual people of the remnants, the residue of the smog, and like sort of like completely brushing the land clean.
Like an eraser, like a magic eraser, and erase everything he did.
At least erasing the smog, the effects of the smog. I mean, it's not so easy to heal people's hearts.
Right, yeah.
But at least, at least if someone were to be able to see the blue sky again, and it rain, and them not being afraid of the rain, and just that feeling of knowing that there is like, the sky is open, that gives people hope, and it gives people healing too.
How do people survive if, like, with it being the sky being covered and it being, you said there's not much differentiation between night and day with the smog up there? How do they grow food? How do animals survive? Like, how do they get enough food to eat to survive? Because every plant except mushrooms, but I'm not really sure they count as plants. Because they grow in darkness, but I don't know of any other plant that does.
Well, I think so. I would point out here that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, after all, he does everything on his own time. He does not care about anyone's opinion. So he is definitely interested in everything having a slow death. So that's why. So that's why, like, for Kairos, Lucian's fourth companion, one of his incentives to embark on the journey that leads him to Lucian is the fact that everything is dying. That he points out that over the 15 years that the Blood-soaked Sorcerers ruled, things are getting worse and worse and worse. That what was before, they grew it with difficulty, but they still grew it. Now they can't grow it anymore. The animals are dying. It's a deteriorating situation. And it's a slow but also accelerating death. So there's also like discussion of like how the first winter after Lucian's reconquest of the First Nation is an incredibly difficult winter, because everything has already gotten so bad. And yes, they're recovering, but they're not recovering fast enough. So if you're asking how people live, I'm sure that they would be also surprised as to how they lived.
That's also the one thing I was like, how do they grow anything? Because any plant that I've ever tried to grow, if I left it in my apartment where I don't get much light, it dies. So even some vegetables that I tried to grow like in a little plot outside my apartment, because it's all shade, they didn't produce anything because it was shade and they wanted sunshine, and fortunately there is no sunshine back there.
It's just like this, like, it's like the combination between the Blood-soaked Sorcerer wanting everything to have a slow death, and the people's resilience, and like between all of that, yes, many of them, like, I think, like, I once calculated
fish wouldn't be affected because, like, when they're swimming around, it is dark. They wouldn't even notice a difference, so there would be still fish.
But the poisoned water from the rains, like the poisoned rain that gets into the rivers.
Yes.
So it's like,
but they could still fish. The fish would have the poison in it. But if they've been living under this with the poison raining on them, it'd be in their drinking water. Like, at some point, they either have to be immune to it, or it just acts so slowly that it wouldn't matter. They could eat some fish. They could eat fish. There we go. We solved their problem.
I feel like
they're eating fish and mushrooms.
I feel like one of the issues, though, is that there's not that many rivers and lakes in Icilia. And Icilia doesn't have any ocean borders. So for the people who could live with it, they're few and far between because they don't. Not a lot of them live on a body of water.
Yeah.
And the grain basket of Icilia, because using real world
Yeah.
politics and ideas as
Hmm.
inspiration, the grain basket of Icilia, it has a couple of major rivers and a few small lakes, but the reason that it's the grain basket is because of the people who live there. So one of the other interesting facets of my world is the fantasy races. So in
Yes,
Icilia,
let's talk about him.
in Icilia I call them kinds and not races. So
Me too.
Kind. Um, they are all magical in some form or another. So there's no non-magic
So
kind.
the magic kind are growing the food.
So
Magic.
so the five kinds, they all have different kinds of magic, and they're all tied tied loosely or tightly, depends on the individual person, but they are all tied to a specific element. So air, water, fire, earth, and the Icilia's unique and sacred element Atar. So the Ezulal, the ones that are tied to water, they are known for being able to grow things. Like they are able to make to they when they work the land, they make it fertile, and that's a quality that they all share. There's definitely degrees to which they manifest their kind's quality, but to some degree they all share it, and though that's the kind that works the breadbasket lands.
I
So
see.
they never exactly relied upon rivers. They had magic, and they grew, and they traded that as communities, and they profited off of it, and they lived off of it. And when there was no blood-soaked sorcerer and everything hadn't turned bad yet, they were doing really well, and they were feeding large amounts of people, and it was all working out. um but it kind of also means that there's not a lot of the the poor nations in my book are not very easily flexible, that they could somehow switch their diets and their ability to live, because their magic kind of their magic and their mentality, their culture, the way they're raised, their skills, it makes them accustomed to a specific environment and a way of life. And then well, it's really difficult to figure out what next to do
Mm.
when everything's falling apart. So it's not like they have the space to think about all of this properly. Like, how do we adapt and live in this dying world? And also, there's also that the Blood-soaked Sorcerer soldiers are everywhere and doing evil and horrible things. Um, the darker sides of my book is that he uses his soldiers to commit human trafficking. He takes pretty children. He steals them from towns and villages in a couple of countries. In other countries, those soldiers just randomly go on murderous rampages. In other countries, they're sort of like the the sentinels in each village that are just watching for one person to put a toe out of line. So they're everywhere, and it makes a hard life so much more harder, because as several of my characters point out, actually, in the bell tolling, several of Lucian's companions, all of it makes that such that they can't leave, they can't
Mhm.
go anywhere, because he's everywhere.
Mhm.
And even if he hasn't reached that point where his awareness is everywhere, his soldiers certainly are.
Then you don't know if it'll be any better anywhere else. You might actually be better off in somewhere else. 'Cause
Well,
I think that's a large reason why some people would stick around. You just the devil, it's a real thing. You don't
mhm.
know what else is out there, and if it's worse, you may not be able to leave and come back to where you were.
I mean, it's like so Kairos. He points out that I would leave if I could. My family's buried here, but I would leave if I could. But there is no safe passage.
Mm.
I couldn't guarantee that if I took my sister and I left, I would be able to make it to anywhere else. Forget what the other place is like. So um it's supposed to be. It's one of Lucian's. It doesn't seem very. It's certainly not very magical, but it's one of his. Like it's kind of revolutionary for his companions that he has the assurance that he can take you somewhere and he's gonna be able to, keep you safe. Okay, the enemy might attack, but he's also able to defend against the enemy. He has weapons. He has the ability to fight, and he has the confidence to do so. I mean, this is pretty crazy to them that you could feel so confident in yourself that you could go from one place to another and think that you're going to arrive safely.
Yeah. Okay. I get how like someone one of the magic kinds who has earth or water magic could keep their land fertile and grow things. But if you have fire or air magic, how does that work?
Well, those kinds aren't living the same kind of lives. So the fire magic kind, the Sholinar, they have actual wings. So, okay, I didn't write actual dragons in my book, but I wrote people who had dragon wings.
Because every fantasy has a dragon-like creature somewhere.
Yes.
So, even if it's very blurry in the background.
That's the Sholinar. They have dragon wings. So their method of living wasn't so much about intensive agriculture. It was more about using the bounty of their land to gather food. So foraging from the skies and hunting from the skies. And then, of course, when everything's falling apart, they can't do that as easily anymore. The Nasimi, the ones that are the wind magic kind, mm-hmm. They have this practice that they're kind of a quasi-nomadic people. So every like 10, 15 years, their towns would gather themselves up, pack up all of the children and the elders, and go somewhere new. And particularly in Nataman, they do that. In other nations, they're not quite as nomadic, but they certainly have the same kind of idea. So they lived off of the chickens they kept, the poultry. They did a little bit of local agriculture, not very intensive, but some like basic herbs and stuff to supplement their diets. And they traded because they were known for trade. They were the sort that actually bought grain from other places and made artistic items, everything from like blankets and clothing to fine things like jewelry and paper. So they were the ones who made things and sold them. And that's how they survived. That's how they lived. So when we're facing a world of environmental and economic collapse, they can't move, which is terrible on their spirits, but they don't have the existing resources for long-term agriculture, so that's not really working for them. Their forests are dying, so they can't hunt as much, and there's no trade. So downward spiral until Lucian comes.
Yeah, that sounds awful. So if you had to become a peasant somewhere in Icilia, where would you want to be? It sounds like the grain basket might be the place to live.
I mean, do I have to actually be a peasant in Icilia at the time?
Yeah, unfortunately, you created the world, so we have to you have to pick somewhere.
I think that the place I would want to pick is the mountains.
Okay.
Why? Not because like there aren't environmental issues, but because in more remote places like that, there's the chance that you could possibly live unnoticed from the Blood-soaked Sorcerer.
I see. That because you'd be hard to find.
Well, if so, one of my characters, Elian, his parents, they do this. So Elian is like the whole proof of the Blood-soaked Sorcerer not caring about anyone or anything, because his father is the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's own brother. And wow. The Blood-soaked Sorcerer
plot twist.
Yeah, so his father is the villain's brother, but at a certain point, long before Elian is born, he becomes discontented with the things that he's being forced to do. He realizes that well, this is not actually what his mother had raised him for, that he's betrayed himself in choosing to love his brother to such a degree that he doesn't question his actions. So he leaves. And along his journey, he meets this woman who helps him sort of refine his moral compass, like put it back together, clarify, clean the dust off. And he falls in love with her, he marries her. The pair of them are exiled, and the Blood-soaked Sorcerer swears vengeance. So the two of them are one of the proofs that it is possible with the right awareness, the situational awareness, the right tactics, the right strategy, the right magic,
landscape,
the right landscape, the right magic to live in the mountains and not be found. And it's in that environment that they have their child Elian, and they manage to survive. And Lucian's story, it's actually not too dissimilar. He grows up in exile in the giant trees of Nadamin, in this one place where they're so exceedingly tall it's not possible to stand at the bottom and see the top. So he grows up in that kind of place, and his life too is an example of being able to hide if you're just careful enough. But the Blood-soaked Sorcerer does eventually kill Elian's parents, so it's not a hard and fast guarantee.
All right, so we should talk about Lucian's companions. You mentioned them a few times, but we should talk about them too. About Arista and Elian, and they should get their little time in the sun because they're important too. They're not just there to be his cheering committee.
they're most definitely not. So excuse me. So Lucian's magic is it's supposed to be at its highest level absolute discretion. He can do anything he wants at any time, any place, just like no holds barred, except for the ethics of his character. And his companions are all integral pieces in those connections of magic. So each of them has a part of Lucian's promise. So it's represented on the surface level by their title. So Elian is the exemplar of his steam. He is supposed to be, and in book 2, I think he, if I do so say myself, shows himself to be the living example of dignity as a part of freedom. So Lucian is the ideal of freedom. Elian is the exemplar of esteem. Elian is human dignity itself, in a sense. Arista is the exemplar of bravery. So she's supposed to be what courage is supposed to be. It's a weird sentence, but it makes sense. And then Kairos is strength, and Malika is wisdom. And so as those titles indicate, they each keep a piece of Lucian's magic, his promise, and the hope and salvation he intends to bring to his people. So in different times and different places, each of them does different things. So they step forward, and this is both in book 1, but also the grander scheme of my books, that they each have a different time and place to shine. And based on their actions, they manage to reach a certain group of people who otherwise would not have been reached, that they wouldn't have believed in Lucian himself. They were too embittered or too angry or too something to realize that there is a way out of all of this darkness. So there's that, but it's also that their magic is able to deal a specific blow to the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. Their actions are supposed to present a particular source of hope, really, to the reader, and so this is a major spoiler, but they also are supposed to tie back they're play an integral role in the salvation of Icilia. They're not the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's lieutenants are straw dolls.
Mhm.
They're there to kind of represent his authority. He doesn't really care about them, and everyone knows that they're monsters, but the real monster is the shadow behind. Lucian's companions are each themselves important figures. They're each themselves, like, as you could say that they're as important as Lucian himself, and he recognizes that about them. They come to recognize that about them, and people come to recognize that about them, that they're each important.
Mhm.
And so, like, on the, like, the relationship side of it, one of the things I have a lot of fun doing is like having certain people and certain groups of people who are more fond of one companion over the others, and so that brings them back into the larger picture and links them back into the larger community. But they're also attached to a specific person. So it's interesting showing kind of those, like, details and allegiances that each person means, each of the companions means something.
Oh wow, that is cool. So now this whole thing has me wondering, like, if when it, at like at the like, is Lucian like ever wonder or concerned about like what will happen if he does defeat the Blood-soaked Sorcerer? Like, because what would he do after that?
I think
And
that,
how would he keep from turning into the thing that he defeated? Because once you've released everyone and saved them all, like, some of them may worship him.
well, some of that can be answered by his predecessor, the first quest leader. So her role in Icilia's mythos is that she's not the creator of civilization. That's the shining guide, but she's the
Right.
one who spreads the gift of civilization to everyone. So the shining guide is this mythical figure who appears, gives civilization to a specific group of people, and then leaves. He spends maybe 30 years in Icilia. The first quest leader, Lady Queen.
As you do when you're, a very powerful mythical figure, after 30 years, I'd have had enough of the earth thing. I'm heading back up to the celestial realms.
So the first quest leader is someone puts her whole lifetime. She puts like over 70 years into first, like, every single part of Icilia, nurturing them, bringing civilization, kind of making it a place where a person has security and their shelter and their food and their drinking, like they giving that, spreading the arts and sciences, like how to write, how to grow food, how to cook, how to, like, all of the different things. She spreads those ideas, and for the years that she lives after she's accomplished this, yeah, she's worshipped, because she's there linked to the divine, and everyone knows that. And she herself has that kind of mythical character, you could say,
Mhm.
that she has that worship, but she has that kind of worship, but herself is aware of her own position in the world. She like, she doesn't become the evil because she is so good. She is so beautiful in her virtue, in her moral character, in her uprightness,
Mhm.
that she passes up the worship to where it's supposed to go rather than keep any for herself. And Lucian is in a similar position, that, okay, he knows that there are, like, legitimately people who worship and pray to him, and he knows that. And he is has so this is kind of like one of those things that makes my books, like, really different, in that he is this character who knows that, accepts that, and then passes it up. He understands that people revere him because he is the only thing they see, but he sees something that is beyond what they see, and he channels it in that direction and does not keep it for himself. And that is kind of the idea that it's expected that he would become after the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is defeated. That it's expected that he would come to that same position, that he rules Icilia in peace, and he continues the work of healing them from this brief but incredibly intense and destructive period of trauma, and ushers in the next golden age. The thing I have to say, though, is we don't know yet what the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's plans allow, how much of the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's plans completely, derail this expectation, because there is a long way to go between book 1 and book 2 and the end of the series, which will be book 7. We have a lot.
That's why I said if.
Yeah, so we don't know yet who makes it and who doesn't, because
right.
It's a long journey, and the Potentiates, the Lucian's companions, don't really think or talk about a world after, because they know that this is a long war and they don't know what's going to happen. They might be called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice. They don't know where their own journey ends. And Lucian doesn't also particularly talk about a life after, because his focus is on, well, I have to get us out of this mess. So let's talk about a life after at other times. That isn't to say that he doesn't think about things like marriage. It's not that he doesn't think about things like that, but he's not really thinking about when the life after comes, that's when we'll be happy or something. Like, that's not really what he's saying. He's more talking, well, we will find a way to have faith in this time. And it's not that he doesn't believe it's coming, but it's that he knows it's a distant prospect at this time.
I mean, that's understandable. He's in the middle of the war. Does the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, how does he change as this is going on? Because he's not unaffected by it.
Mm-hmm. So I think that the biggest change is, okay. So okay, definitely he has more evil plans. He has evil plans that are in the worst when Lucian comes, that are revealed as time passes, and then he comes up with more evil plans when he realizes who Lucian is. The big thing is that so one of Lucian's companions, Malika, her mother is the last person to defeat the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. At the very beginning of his rise, she's the last person to have defeated him in battle, brought him to such a point where he had to surrender and that he bled, right? So that is now 30 years ago. After her, the Blood-soaked Sorcerer has no true opponents. I mean, there are some challenging people he defeats, like Lucian's mother. She is a very powerful warrior. He defeats her. There are many challenging people he defeats, but no one actually makes him bleed.
I see.
And then when he realizes who Lucian really is, he realizes that he actually hasn't killed the quest leader, that he's actually still alive. He has this thinking, okay, so this is an opponent unlike any I've ever faced before. And he evolves his magic accordingly to face that. And I don't think we could really say that he gets a crisis of confidence or something, because he's not really the type to get that.
Is he excited? Like, oh, I finally have somebody worthy of me.
That's more of his feeling. Like, there is a resource existent in the world, because he doesn't see people as people, right? So there is a resource of magic available in the world that I can exploit if I figure out how. And that is how he sees Lucian and how he sees his companions. And he sees those 4 companions as a way of acquiring Lucian's magic as a resource.
That's cold. That's a cold way of looking at the world. How did the Blood-soaked Sorcerer get like that? Like, did he pop out of the womb like, I'm going to take over everything?
So
Who hurt him?
So when I was creating his character, like going back and adding substance to his character, sorry, like sometime during book 1. I decided to go the extreme route and make it such that he has very loving parents. He actually has, like, your ideal parents. His father passes away when he's very young. His mother remarries, but the thing is, his mother, his father, and his stepfather, they all absolutely adore him. He is a noble, so he is the heir to his county. Um, that does in Icilia, that doesn't mean necessarily that he grows up in luxury, but he does grow up with people's veneration. People, like, for the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, when he was in his teens and early 20s, people basically, like, worshiped the ground he walked on because they adored him so much. So his life is perfect. But then he finds reasons to question it. So it begins with him questioning why his mother doesn't get enough recognition. And then it turns into questioning her. And then it turns into questioning her presence in his life, and then her presence in the world. And then it turns into, like, eventually taking her life. And he he is the villain who makes his own dark path, and it's why he's so powerful, because there was no reason for him to take it, and yet he took it.
Oh, wow.
So he cobbles together his own dark path.
That's powerful. I really wish they had done that with Darth Vader. That was, yeah. That's the backstory that Darth Vader should have had, taken his own path. But that's really cool. So then he everything was a choice.
Yes, and that's supposed to be exactly the point, that he chooses every step of it. And on the other side, Lucian, although he is born into, not kind of all that dissimilar from the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, he's born into a royal family. He is born, well, his presence
but in exile in the mountains.
Prior to the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's takeover, he's born in hiding in the palace. So he's born in the palace, but he's in hiding from the day he's born. And then eventually he lives in exile. But he too makes a choice at every step, that he chooses, yes, I'm going to take all this education to learn how to be powerful enough to defeat the villain and take back my world. I am
Does
going
he
to
feel does he feel like responsible because it's kind of his uncle? Like, okay, this is my own family. Like, I kind of I want to do something about this.
It's Elian who is his uncle.
Oh, it's okay. I'm getting him confused.
I actually don't think that that's really one of the factors in Elian accepting Lucian's offer of becoming one of his companions. Like, Elian is sort of, he accepts Lucian's offer because he wants to do good in the world, and just purely simply wants to do good in the world. And it's not it's not feeling responsible for the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, since he's not really raised to think of him as his uncle. He's raised to think of him as a monster. He's more thinking that, in spite of the fact that this man is my uncle, I want to be allowed the opportunity to do good in the world. I want people to judge me for my own character.
Yeah, that's a good reason.
That's more his idea. Malika is a crown princess when she's born. She's the like I mentioned, she's the daughter of the last person who defeated the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. So she's someone he absolutely hates, and she spends most of her first, like, after, from the ages of like 6 to 15 in the Blood-soaked Sorcerer's dungeons, and then afterwards on the run until Lucian finds her. So really heavy story. She accepts Lucian because she thinks that I am responsible, even now, for what happened to the people of Koroma. Not because necessarily that you could say that I caused it, but because they're my people, and I want to do something for them. I'm responsible just because. Arista she's also born to a royal family, the one royal family that betrays, that from almost the beginning, defects to the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. It's also really interesting because our family is matriarchal, and the Blood-soaked Sorcerer is a class A misogynist.
Yeah.
Um,
The mental gymnastics that must have taken must have been awesome. Cirque du
well,
Soleil worthy.
yeah. So her family, like, okay. So the thing is that you're thinking mental gymnastics. That's what Arista thinks. That she's like, how did they not figure that out? That he does not respect us. How did they not figure that out? Like, what we the reader are thinking. That's what Arista thinks. But her aunts and her grandmother, they very well went through the whole mental gymnastics, that they spent the pride of their matriarchal house, and they put themselves in that position. And then, of course, the Blood-soaked Sorcerer exploited it and made it so much worse. But Arista looks at this and thinks that my parents have kept me safe from the worst of this, and I owe them the chance to do good in the world. And then Kairos' motivation is really simple. He wants to make the world a better place so his sister has a safer world to grow up to than he did. So they all come to it from slightly different variations, but they ultimately very quickly accept Lucian's um, discussion that, well, we are born to save these people, and it's our duty and our responsibility and our joy. And will you join me? And they say yes.
Did they actually have any sort of like alternative though? Like, was there any other option that they could have taken that would have made sense?
Well, I think that if you were to ask if they had other alternatives, I think that if they had not wanted to pledge allegiance to Lucian and accept all of this immense responsibility, he probably would have still like given them a safe passage to a safer place than they currently were in. Like, he would have done that. He does make it very clear that this is all a choice, and like, there's different places where I try to, like, add some underlines to it to make sure it's properly emphasized, that he is very clear that I would be spreading peace and safety to the people of Icilia even if they didn't pledge allegiance to me, because I just would.
Because
There
he's not
might be
doing it for that. He's not doing it to gain their allegiance or anything.
He's not doing it to be worshipped. So he would still give it to them. Now, the fact that they give him their allegiance, it empowers him to be able to fight on their behalf. So, and it makes sense with his magic. So one of the things I really love about fantasy and about my fantasy world in particular, that all of the relationships that are like, well, okay, so they feel that about this person and they feel this way about this person. They feel this way about their nation. All of that can be described in magic. So the way that Lucian feels about his people, there are magical ties behind that. The way that each nation, like the people of each nation, rise up to defend their nation, there are magical ties behind that too. And it makes something, it's much more interesting to see those kinds of things become tangible rather than just describing the fact that they exist.
No, I get it. I have one of the magic systems that I have is belief based. The more people who believe in the person trying to do the thing, the more power they have to do the thing that will save them. It's sort of reciprocal. Because you believe, I can save you. If you don't believe, I can't save you. Sometimes a character doesn't always remember that that's a prerequisite. But
so for Lucian, he has immense power of his own. But people believing in him means that, okay, they'll fight for him. So he needs an army to defeat the Blood-soaked Sorcerer. They will become his army. Their belief lends him extra energy. So it's not energy that we could say that he needs, because he has so much energy in and of himself. He has this, in Icilia, this is like a unheard of thing, that he is able to use his own soul's energy in order to achieve great feats of magic. That is something that no one else can do, not even the Blood-soaked Sorcerer, really. At least not yet. So Lucian is able to
He's
do
like a
that.
Pokemon, continually evolving.
Yeah. So Lucian is able to use his own soul's energy for that. And he has a lot of energy to spare to do all of these things. But when people believe in him, it makes him happy. And it gives him just a little bit extra. And so he's not doing it for that purpose, but this is sort of for him the extra benefit, the fact that they love him in return. It brings him joy. And it helps that he gets a little more energy to be able to continue to spend it on their behalves. So I mean, you could say that my magic system is a very deeply energy based system. You'd even say it's like
Aren't they all though?
it's like a system of harmonics, because like I went really deep into ideas of harmony and discord for book 2, and I have a feeling I will get probably deeper as the books go on.
That's really cool. That's really cool.
Have we frozen on the show?
I hear you. I was like, did I freeze or did she freeze? Because I can't tell on my end. But I hear you. So if you hear me, then we're not frozen. Maybe all this talk of energy is disrupting the internet.
That's definitely a possibility.
Is there something out of harmony here? Yeah, I don't know why the picture is frozen. We broke the internet.
Okay, well, it came back.
Yeah, I don't know what that was because I heard you the whole time. So usually it like the sound cuts out, and then I'm like, oh, something happened. But that didn't happen. So I'm assuming, I don't know, maybe the Blood-soaked Sorcerer didn't like you giving away his secrets.
Well,
he's causing the recording to decay.
And then Lucian brought it back, maybe?
Maybe.
I mean, I think to a great degree he would not mind me giving away his secrets, because, I mean, that's why you're reading this book, so you can find out about his secrets.
Oh, of course. We want everybody's secrets. That's why we read. We don't want any of the secrets hidden. We want to find out everything. And you were saying before that, so we've got the prequel that is out. We have books 1 and 2. 2 just came out. So have you started 3 yet?
So for the people who can actually see it, maybe people can see it. This is the prequel. It's like a blue cover with black clouds on one side with a sword and subtly like purple pink flower petals. And it says the wait would become. That's the first prequel. I will probably end up writing more prequels. Probably meaning I've already started drafting.
That's ones you recorded that one because I have the audiobook.
And then there is the bell tolling. And then the bell tolling is a complement novel, The Resonant Bell. So it goes around the events of the bell tolling and describes events from other people's perspectives that were there but not main characters, so people around the potentiates. And then finally I have The Reverence Chosen, which is, for the people who can see it, so it's another black gray cover with a little less black and gray and just a hint more white. And on one side is the other half of Elian's face, and on the other side is the first half of Arista's face, the Reverence Chosen. And they both are wearing crowns. And yes, I've started book 3. So based on my current pace, I'm kind of looking for book 3 to come out at the end of 2025. But before that, I plan to complete the complement novel of The Reverence Chosen, The Gifted Reverence, which will be probably this December. And then the second prequel, because that is a really fun story when everything else feels too overwhelming. It's the story of Elian's parents. I should not say it's fun.
Wait, so it's the sequel to a prequel?
Kind of. It's the sequel to a prequel, but then the prequel to the main series.
We need a word for that.
I've never actually thought of it that way, but
I saw a post in a writers group where somebody was like, I wrote a prequel, but now the prequel has sequels. And the sequels are also prequels. What do you call that? And there was this long discussion, and it's been on my mind.
Well, I definitely have that with this upcoming book that I'm still in the middle of writing. So it's going to be a busy year and a half, but, well, Melinda, writing is its own pleasure, and words have children.
Yes, they do. And characters don't behave. They don't follow outlines. They give us a hard time.
And, when it's Lucian, he definitely has opinions about how he'd like his story to go. And ideas about who should do what and do what where.
And they don't care if that violates story structure. They leave that to us to figure out the mechanics and make it all work.
I mean, there's also some places where he saves me from making a big mistake.
That's true.
I was in the start of book 3. I was about to put them in the wrong place for the next events to unfold, and he something that he was doing got me to thinking that, oh wait, they should be here rather than there, because if they're there, they would have to somehow walk across a lake, and if they're here, they could just go around it. It'd be so much simpler.
Yeah. I like when that happens and the character's like, no. I don't like when they're all usually right. I don't like when they make a decision that makes you massively have to restructure what you were going to do. Even though the final product is usually better, but it's such a frustration when you're like, now I don't know where we're going. I'm just following along in the adventure with you guys. I hope you know where you're going, because I don't anymore.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So those are your writing projects into 2025. So we're recording this on May 31st, 2024. So all estimates are based upon that date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We will see where the muse takes us.
Yeah. They always take us somewhere. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the bells? It's after 9, so my brain is starting to slide out of my ears.
It's okay.
The bell tolling. Yes.
I feel like I've left you and the audience with a bunch of spoilers and background ponderings about magic. So the last thing I want to say is that magic in Icilia is matrilineal. And kind is patrilineal. But the key thing is that since magic is matrilineal, it makes Icilia, even the quest magic is in a sense matrilineal.
Okay.
It makes for a more matriarchal slant to everything. Because
as it should be.
Yes. Because magic, if your mother has it, then you have it. And the quest is also reliant upon it passing down from their mothers. It does not pass down from their fathers.
Okay. Are there people who don't have magic?
Well, everyone has kind magic, but there are definitely people who don't have magic other than that.
So you can have 2 types of magic, one you got from your mother, one you got from your father?
Kind of, because kind magic is an underlying kind of quality, and other kinds of magic are more active usually. Keyword usually.
I see. Did we hit all the cool things about your world that you never get to talk about?
I think that we got as many of them as we have time for.
Yeah, it is getting a little bit on the late side for me. But I'm willing to stick around because this is all fun and fascinating for me. I love all this stuff. Did you want to do an excerpt? We never did the excerpt.
I do actually have to leave in like.
Okay.
I do have to leave.
Oh, okay. That's fine. That's fine. Well, then let's wrap it up then. This has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. I've been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and today we had
Amena Jamali.
And we talked about the bell tolling, the Reverend's Chosen, a couple other books in the Lord of Freedom series. So thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with another episode, another fantasy author soon. So stick around, remember to like, follow, share, etc., so that you are notified when this comes out, the next episode. And we hope that Amena will be back to talk about another book another time. Yeah. Thank you so much.